I was born in Germany in the 1990s. While being raised there, I learned that Germany is quite a safe place in terms of natural disasters. It was said we were not subjected to the likelihood of earthquakes, there's no volcanic activity around, cyclones and hurricanes were also not to be expected, and the general hazard of bushfires was small. Last year then, the following events set Germany under a large shock. A terrible flood catastrophe has hit a region in western Germany, and 20,000 people have lost their homes and belongings from just one day to the other day. The magnitude of the natural disaster surprised many of us, and Germany was everything but prepared. Alone in this year, in 2022, we have seen similar events ranging from Australia via Pakistan to Mozambique. And experts say this is only the start of the devastating consequences of climate change. Events like those show us that we cannot take the living conditions on this planet for granted any longer. And they raise loud calls for action. The emission of CO2 into the atmosphere is one of the largest drivers of climate change. And we mainly do so by burning fossil fuels, coal, oil, and gas, to power our modern lives. During this process, we release the once petrified carbon into the atmosphere, which endangers the natural balance of our environment. The challenging causality is that the more people we are on the planet, and the better our living conditions get, the more energy we use and the more emissions we create. Experts are now projecting our worldwide energy use to increase by 50% until 2050. I think we can agree on the fact that we want human development in every part of the world. But does that mean we just burn more and more coal and just live with the natural disasters? There's a couple of things we can do to promote a carbon-neutral lifestyle. One option is carbon capture. Applying the net zero principle, we still use the fossil fuels, but we take the emissions right out of the air. We bind the atoms and store them somewhere, like they used to be stored in our fossil fuels. Basalt rock, of which Iceland actually has large natural resources, is an optimal substance to do so. More efficient and cheaper, however, we will always be if we avoid the CO2 emission in the first place. To do that, we can switch to energy-efficient appliances. For example, your car's modern combustion engine today uses considerably less gasoline for the same distance than one in the 1990s. Same applies to white goods, like fridges or laundry machines, such as machinery in industrial manufacturing. So the impact of such energy and efficiency innovations may be immense already. Ultimately, however, we want to replace the fossil fuels completely by electricity generated with renewable energy. And in our car example, this would, of course, be electric cars. Here we fill up the battery with green electricity, we fulfill our mobility needs, and we have avoided the CO2 emission completely. Substituting those fossil fuels by electricity is not just happening in the car industry, but also hugely in heating of buildings and in industrial manufacturing. Renewables do have a broad range, from large hydropower plants via on- and offshore wind parks to rooftop solar. And most optimistic scenarios actually project that wind and solar alone may generate 50% of worldwide energy use in 2050. And to get there, we need you. Today, I want to introduce you to a concept around renewable energy in which every one of you can participate. It doesn't matter whether you're the owner of a single-family house or the tenant of a 3-room apartment here in Zurich. Energy sharing empowers every one of you to get started with renewables right away. So please meet Julia. Julia and her family have recently built a house, and for the sake of the environment, they decided to install solar panels on their roof. The household is now generating electricity, and whenever they need it, they use it. 30% of their annual electricity consumption is actually provided by those solar panels, and as they don't have to buy this electricity from the utility any longer, they considerably decrease their utility bill. All in all, they expect to amortize the investment in the solar panels in 15 years, which is typical for the solar industry. What's interesting, though, is that their average daily consumption pattern, here in blue, does not quite match their daily average production pattern, here in yellow. And especially during work hours or when the family is away on vacation, they actually have too much electricity. So what do they do with the electricity? One option would be putting the electricity in a battery to use later at night. The production of such batteries, however, requires large amounts of lithium, and even if we had all the financial resources, it would take decades to mine all the lithium to provide all of you with a battery, as we're having a current scarcity in the resource. Another option would be selling the electricity to the utility company. Many countries offer this today, yet only at a small remuneration. So this option is feasible, but not attractive. What if I told you that you could sell this electricity to your neighbors instead? This is what we call energy sharing. So imagine Julia has a neighbor called John. John has recently started his first job, he lives in a rented apartment, and his general living conditions do not allow him to install solar panels on his roof and start generating electricity on his own. But with energy sharing, he can directly buy renewable energy from Julia. Both parties, the buyers and sellers, they do have a real impact by producing and trading renewable energy. And with their engagement in energy sharing, they contribute to one of the largest challenges of human mankind, climate change. With this concept, we incentivize that electricity will be consumed where it is produced, and vice versa, that it will be produced where it is consumed. This reduces the need to transport electricity through continents, and thus also reduces the need to extend our current grid infrastructure in the long run. And at the same time, it makes people more independent from the grid. Due to day and night, such as summer and winter cycles, an electricity-producing household alone is independent from the grid by 30%. In an energy community in which we optimize the allocation of electricity, members may double their independence from the grid. And this is a revolution. Just think about the impact this would have on Ukrainian people at the moment who are subjected to power cuts due to damaged infrastructure. And last but not least, sun and wind are for free. The International Energy Agency has recently crowned solar to be the cheapest form of generating electricity when analyzing life cycle costs of different power plants. And with energy sharing, which heavily relies on solar, participants may save on costs, may ensure price stability, and may amortize their investments in renewables even faster than in 15 years. Not too bad in the turbulent times of the European energy crisis. The concept sounds easy, doesn't it? Deploying energy sharing at large, it could be a game changer in the energy transition, as it engages people and motivates private investments in renewables. So let's consider how we're getting there and which conditions we need to fulfill for energy sharing. First of all, we need the technical infrastructure and the software. We need power lines connecting our buyers and sellers. In many countries, we may use the local distribution grid for transporting electricity from one household to the other household. In areas without such infrastructure, we have to build those power lines. Next, we need to measure how much electricity our participants are producing and consuming in order to calculate what is available to share. And here we do have to talk about electricity meters. Here you see an analog electricity meter counting up in kilowatt hours, which is the unit we use for measuring electricity. And you might remember the times when once a year an employee of your utility company would knock on your door to read your meter reading. This totally served the purpose of creating an annual electricity bill. But other than that, what do you learn from the fact that you consume this amount of kilowatt hours throughout the whole year? Today, we have digital or so-called smart meters. With that technology, we do not need to send persons any longer into your house, but the technology directly pushes the data into the cloud. This allows us to disentangle your energy consumption, showing you graphs like this. Here you see when you are consuming energy throughout the day, and accounting for the production of the local solar panels, we may now calculate how much electricity a buyer is receiving from the sellers. So this is obviously not done with pen and pencil, but with state-of-the-art software algorithms. During my PhD at ETH a few colleagues and I, we implemented the software for Switzerland's first energy sharing community. Later on, we founded a startup. And the smart distribution algorithms we are developing at our company today, they optimize the allocation of available electricity, and they make sure we are maximizing in terms of CO2. Now that we know the amount of electricity exchanged, we have to talk about the price. And here I would like to take you on a quick journey and shed some light on the current structure of your electricity bill. This is how it looks like. When you take power out of the power plug, you pay for generating the electricity, you pay for transporting the electricity from the power plant to your house, and there is taxes and fees and VAT that you're paying to the government. With the European energy crisis, we have recently seen electricity prices to explode, even ending up in doubled energy spendings per household. Here you see the price for 1 kilowatt hour. With energy sharing, we are now seeing two things. The first of all is that our buyers and sellers can agree on a price for generating the electricity that is fair to them. Unfortunately, it's not that easy with grid fees and taxes, as those are regulated markets. The good news, however, is that European governments are much in favor of energy sharing and are currently in the process of announcing financial incentives that make energy sharing even more attractive. Switzerland is currently discussing to reduce the grid fees by 25%. Austria, Spain, and Luxembourg have already considerably decreased the grid fees and taxes, sometimes by up to 100%, and Italy is giving direct subsidies. And combining these two factors, we see that every kilowatt hour we consume from our neighbors is considerably cheaper than the one from the utility company. A standard household consumes 30% of its electricity from the neighbors. Accounting for this, we end up with annual savings on your electricity bill of 20%. Isn't that fantastic news? For the concept to take off, we need the willingness of people to participate in energy sharing. I still remember the kickoff meeting of my research project vividly. A room full of energy experts with a lifelong experience in the sector. And they all told us the population is not ready for energy sharing. But we managed to surprise them. 90% of the contacted households signed up for our experiments and turned into active users of our app, which showed them where their electricity came from and how much they paid for it. These findings are much in line with other academic surveys from other countries. Throughout the experiment, we learned that financial incentives are a great motivation for people to get started with energy sharing, whereas being independent from the grid, contributing to fighting climate change, and belonging to a community motivated households to continue with energy sharing. With the startup I co-founded, we are today delivering the software for energy sharing to utility companies. If your local utility company offers energy sharing, you can sign up for the service with just a few clicks and have software do the rest for you. And with a couple of hundred energy communities having been founded in Europe today, I'm convinced we will be seeing this concept widespread all over Europe within the next few years. So today I've shown you the importance of a carbon-neutral lifestyle and how energy sharing contributes to it. And here once again, it addresses every one of you. If you own solar panels, you can participate as a seller. If you don't own solar panels, don't worry about it. You can still participate as a buyer and buy the locally produced electricity. Because in the end, it's all about creating a well-calibrated balance of our buyers and sellers in our local energy communities. And I would say, now it's up to you. The decision between natural disasters following our carbon-heavy lifestyle and our carbon neutral lifestyle based on renewable energy, that's yours. Thank you.